Good morning, my dear friends. I hope you're all doing very well. Today we're going to be learning chapter 19 in the laws of Shabbat. We're going to be continuing to learn, the laws of transferring from a private domain to a public domain on Shabbat in a very interesting scenario. We're going to be talking about a person who is wearing a certain article, not necessarily clothing, but they're wearing a certain article and want to wear this in a public, to go out into a public domain, go out onto the street with it on Shabbat. In what case would this be permissible, and in what case would this not be permissible? So the Rambam is going to be discussing this over here in chapter 19 of the laws of Shabbat. Join along. So the Rambam begins off by saying that a weapon is something, any weaponry should not be worn on Shabbat because, exactly for this reason, that we are worried that the person might pull out their weapon and carry it and would not be wearing it anymore. Because clothing, to go out and onto the street wearing clothing is allowed on Shabbat. Of course, if we are wearing it. But if we are not wearing it, but rather we're just holding this article of clothing or any object that we're wearing, that's where already the problem begins, because we're not allowed to carry on Shabbat in a public domain. So if it's an article of clothing, if it's a weapon which is an actual clothing, like maybe a helmet or iron boots, something like that, which are still considered a weapon, they are not regular clothing, so then a person would not be liable because they're wearing it. But if a person it's just something which they stuck into a holster, so then that would be different, and it would be a problem, they would be liable. Now, these, in regards to wearing, for instance, a sandal which is studded with nails, which is a type of weapon, at the end of the day, it's not a regular item of clothing, we should also not wear on Shabbat. But if we're talking about like a belt that also has like studded pieces of metal, gold or silver, so that's already different. That's already just a piece of jewelry. Well, then we are allowed to wear it, as long as it's fastened on properly and it's not going to be very loose and you might carry it. So in such a case, then it will be a problem. But generally speaking, if it's a belt, if it's a piece of jewelry, so then that's already permissible. Talking about jewelry, the Rambam continues to discuss, what about there's a certain article of jewelry which is easier to take off and it doesn't just stay on in the same way, which is a ring. Now a ring, since it is easy for it to slip off, or you might just slip it off and show it to your friends and so on and so forth, so then it's already a problem. So that's not just in regards to rings, but any article of jewelry that might be taken off to show off, so to speak, which back in the day, wearing jewelry wasn't in the same way as we have it today. The commentators discuss this in regards to jewelry. But generally speaking, what the Rambam is saying over here, the commentators all discuss about it, then as we go along, I'll show you. So the Rambam says like this: there are two types of rings. There is a ring that has a seal on it. So it's like a ring that had a little seal and you're able to put it into ink and seal it. And then there is another type of ring which is just a piece of jewelry and it's not a seal, it's just a flat, plain piece of metal. Maybe it has a little stone or something, but that's already an article of jewelry, not as much as a seal, which is also jewelry, but it's a different type of jewelry. So the Rambam says, a ring with a seal is an article of jewelry which is mainly worn by men, and an article of jewelry of a ring which doesn't have a seal, that is mainly worn by women. So therefore, a woman who wears a ring without a seal, which is the way that women wear rings on Shabbat, that's the way that she should wear it, and that's fine, she's allowed to carry it. A man who wears a ring with a seal, which is a manly piece of jewelry, then they are allowed to do that. But the vice versa, to switch it over, is not good, and they should not carry it out on Shabbat. Because we are worried that they might, first of all, they might just take it off. And because it's not their natural way of wearing them. But on the other hand, since they are taking it out into the street on Shabbat, so then there is a problem. It's like as if they are carrying it, because they don't usually wear these when they go out. Now, the Rambam continues in discussing the laws of jewelry, and he says that generally speaking, a woman, if she's able to, should not wear a ring, even if it's a piece of jewelry. And even though there is no stamp, there's not a signet ring, still she should not go out on Shabbat wearing it, even though technically she's allowed to, as we said earlier, just a moment ago. But it's still, she should not do it, because we're worried about the fact that she might take it off to show to her friends, as the Rambam says, as the women always do. And this is very important, because the commentators come along and they say, this was back in the day, in the days of the Talmud or earlier, where we find that women would take off their jewelry because they wouldn't really wear their jewelry as much in the same way, and they would hang out in public areas and they would take off their jewelry to show one another if they were wearing them. But then later on, after the time of the Talmud, in the time of the Geonim, which was the generation after the Talmud, so then the ways of the world changed a little bit. And then people were hanging out more in homes, not necessarily so much in public domains, and wearing jewelry became more of a standard. So therefore, it is acceptable today, and this is going on for thousands of years already, but it's more acceptable today that a woman should wear jewelry on Shabbat going out onto the street, especially in the Ashkenazic community. So you might find that there are still some Sephardic communities that they'll say that a woman should not wear any jewelry on Shabbat because we're worried that she might carry it, she might take it off. So it's just an interesting note to note over here in regards to this law of jewelry. So the Rambam is talking he's quoting us from the Talmud, is quoting us from the plane of Jewish law, but there is a side of leniency when it comes to this in regards to jewelry, most specifically for women. But today, I would say, since there are also rings which are not signet rings, which are also very common for men to wear, probably in that regard, the same law, the same logic would apply, so that a man would be able to wear that if they constantly wear it on Shabbat as well. In regards to wearing a pin, so a pin without an eye, just a pin, is a type of jewelry. So a woman is allowed to wear that on Shabbat, and because it's part of her jewelry. And the Rambam says, generally speaking, this is the rule. If it's something which is generally worn this way, and we're not worried that you're going to take it off, we're not worried that it's going to fall off and that you're going to carry it, in such a case, you would be allowed to carry it and wear it on Shabbat and take it out into an open public domain. But if it is something which is, even though it might be a piece of jewelry, even though it might be something which is beautifying you, but still we're worried that a person might take it off, we're worried that it might fall off, we're worried that you might take it off to show to someone else, in such a case, we would say, better don't wear it on Shabbat, so that you won't come to actually carry it on Shabbat. So therefore, the Rambam says that there's a certain type of wig, which it's not the same type of wig as we have today, but it's more like wigs that they would stick onto their heads. Those, we might be worried that they might take it off, so then don't wear it. But again, it follows the same logic in regards to jewelry, that today there is a certain leniency in regards to this, which the earlier sages have already spoken about, instituted. So therefore, it's something which will be more lenient today in regards to wearing a wig, which, especially usually when you wear a wig today, you don't just take it off. Continuing on, the Rambam continues on by saying like this, in regards to a woman who wants to go out and she has a little piece of, like a little piece of cotton or something, which is in her shoe, in order so that it shouldn't hurt her foot. Like these new shoes, you wear something that they shouldn't rub. So then that's allowed to be worn. Because it's something which you stick in once and it just stays there while you wear the shoe. So if a person puts in he says like a grain of salt or something to make your bad breath to go away. I guess they didn't really have any mint candies back in the day, but something like that you're allowed to, although it's better not to do it. It's to do it on Shabbat, to go outside with it is not you should be careful, because maybe you'll spit it out, maybe you'll carry it, maybe you'll take it out of your mouth, and so on. So, but technically speaking, it is allowed. A toothpick, which a person has stuck between their teeth to help take out something. So the Rambam says this sliver of wood, toothpick, would be allowed to have. I guess they would keep it there all the time. I guess they work differently than the toothpicks of today. But in regards to a Band-Aid, so the Rambam continues talking about medically a person who has a Band-Aid, something which is over an open wound, a bandage. So he says that that's something which you are allowed to put on. And except, and this is a very interesting thing, he says that they had these types of strings or cords that they would tie them on, these various Band-Aids. They didn't come up yet with the sticky ones. So he says that this cord is something which you want to keep. So if a person will come to take off the Band-Aid out in the public domain, but will still want to keep that cord which is tying it, so that will be a problem, because they might carry the cord. So he says better not to wear the cord, but rather only to have the Band-Aid itself just tied on its own, without any strings attached, so to speak. In regards to wearing shoes on Shabbat, of course we're allowed to wear shoes when we go out onto the road. How about to wear only one shoe? So he says, generally speaking, a person should not only wear one shoe when going out, unless a person has pain in their foot and now they can't wear their shoe, but they still have to go outside, so they're allowed to wear their shoe which is on their foot, which feels comfortable with wearing that shoe. But the one that is not feeling well will be without a shoe, so that will be fine. But generally speaking, the normal way is to wear two shoes, so you should wear two shoes. But if it's a shoe which is very easy to slip off, like a slipper or so on, or a brand new shoe which you keep on taking off because it hurts, so as you're breaking into the new shoe, a person should wear it before Shabbat, this new shoe, and to break into it a little bit, and then can wear it on Shabbat. But generally speaking, if it's something which you might take off, a slipper which might slip off, so then better not to wear it outside on Shabbat, but rather it should be something which is not so easy just to slip off on its own like that. An article of clothing which you are not actually wearing, but rather it is folded and just sitting on your shoulder. Or it doesn't really, even if it's an article of clothing, but it's not really wrapped around you, just sitting, piece of, a garment which is just hanging. So then that's already a problem, because you're not really wearing it. It's just sitting on you. So that would be a problem. So therefore, we should not do that. We should not wear that and go out into a public domain on Shabbat. A talus, prayer shawl, which has tzitzis hanging off it. The tzitzis strings, the corner strings of a talus, as you can see over here. These tzitzis, they are hanging off the main part of the garment. So seemingly, the main part of the garment is the actual garment that you're wearing, but the strings are extra. So are you allowed to wear them on Shabbat? So the Rambam says, yes, you are. Because they are part of the beautifying the article of clothing, the tzitzis, namely, and therefore you are allowed to wear them on Shabbat. If a person is walking down the street on Shabbat and sees a pair of tefillin sitting on the side of the road, and now it's Shabbat, but there's a pair of tefillin over here, and they might get stolen, they might get drained upon, anything can happen to them. What should we do? So the Rambam says, you can wear them, put them on, and walk home, because they're an article of clothing. They're an article which is worn, and that is the way they are worn. We wear them on us. It's like clothing. So we're allowed to put them on and wear them on Shabbat, and walk home and take them off once we get home. Although we don't usually put on tefillin on Shabbat, just in generally speaking, we don't wear tefillin on Shabbat. But if we're trying to move them from a place where they might get ruined or stolen, so then that will be allowed. Another way is you can sit there and wait till the end of Shabbat and then take them home. A third way is you're allowed to move them just a little bit, which is allowed, up to 4 cubits. You're allowed to move it a little bit, and then move it a little bit, and then move it a little bit, and so on, all the way till you get home. As we've already discussed, the idea of moving something just a little bit on Shabbat. How about a Torah scroll? A person is walking down the street and suddenly sees a Torah scroll on the side of the road in the middle of Shabbat. So you should do better to wait there till the end of Shabbat and then take it home. Now, but if we're worried that it's going to get wet or stolen, or maybe it's a dangerous area and you're scared of sitting there till it gets dark, so then the Rambam says a very interesting thing. He says that you can wrap yourself in the Torah scroll and walk home, because it's you can wear it as a garment. Now, of course, to wrap oneself in a Torah scroll is not it's not a very nice thing to do. It's not very, it's not very respectful for a Torah scroll to do that. But in such a case, there is a special leniency granted, lest the Torah scroll will become ruined or stolen or so on. So therefore, in order to preserve the Torah, so the Torah itself says, do this, although it's not as respectful. And usually we don't do this, but in such a case, you can do it in order to save the Torah. A person who is a tailor should not go outside on Shabbat wearing a needle, which is what they would usually do to show that they are tailors. Or a scribe should not go out with a pen hanging on their ear on Shabbat. It's not usually the way that this is worn. So therefore, we should not do this on Shabbat. And even right before Shabbat begins, you should also be careful not to do it, because maybe they'll forget, because it's just sitting there. And we should be careful not to do this. If a person is walking in just before Shabbat begins and they're wearing their tefillin, so they should just continue walking home with it. As we mentioned already before, this is the way you're allowed to actually wear them outdoors on Shabbat in a public domain, in order to transfer them, to bring them to a safe place, to a shawl, to a study hall, or so on and so forth. That is the chapter for today, my friends. This is chapter 19, learning about wearing certain articles which are not necessarily clothing, but in what case would they be permitted, and in what case would they not be permitted. Hope you all followed along. We are 2/3 way through the laws of Shabbat. Hope you're enjoying. We will see you tomorrow.